Welcome to the Lava Fantasy Football League. This is the Week 16 recap. We are now in the semifinals, and I want to say the games were not as close and interesting, but we cover it anyway. As far as today's drink, I don't know. I made a shot. This is silver tequila and some blue curacao. I really don't drink shots, but I'm just gonna sip it. Because I may not be in the playoffs, but I'm in good spirits. Lions made won the division for the first time in 30 years, so I'm ripping the hat. Also displaying, shout out to Eric, getting me a Calvin Johnson wide receiver. Shout out to Eric for giving me that. He won that in some kind of auction. And repping the Dodgers too, because I know it's not football, but we got Shohei, we got Yoshinobu Yamamoto, so repping the Dodgers. Also, Mookie Betts, Dodger baseball. And if you look at the puppies, look at Milo. Hey Milo. He's also repping the Lions jersey, and Pumpkin is repping a Dodger jersey, even though you can't really see it. Yeah, so we're pretty excited. And the fantasy still continues to be interesting. Again, we had a couple of matchups in the championship bracket of haves versus have-nots in terms of Mike B has a championship. Jeremy has multiple championships. Morgan doesn't have a championship, and James doesn't either. And those were the head-to-heads. And then we even have the consolation bracket, which also continues to be interesting, because if you look at the total scores for some of the players there, would have been interesting had the seedings turned out a little bit different. So let's start with, we'll use the stat tracker. The only problem with the stat tracker is it doesn't really show like the status, questionable, doubtful, probable, out. But we can double back and look at the other way. This is Gary versus Brad. Final score was 100.12 to 86.7. This game was not close. It was projected to be close, but then down the stretch, something that no one expected on Monday night happened, and that was the downfall of the San Francisco 49ers getting knocked off by the Ravens. That kind of largely dictates what happened to Brad. In terms of what Gary had, Baker Mayfield feels like the Tampa Bay has their quarterback of the future. He's playing really well for them, has them in the playoff hunt. They knock off the Jacksonville Jaguars. He has 2 passing touchdowns. Jalen Waddle, this one is an interesting case because he got hurt, man, so he was limited by this first half score. Puka Nacua, he is making a case for offensive rookie of the year. 2 rushing attempts, 16 rushing yards, 9 catches for 164 receptions, and a touchdown. CJ Stroud continues to be on the sidelines, and Nacua continues to I don't know. So they might go to Nacua. He continues to be dominant thanks to Stafford being healthy and the Rams just being really good at the right time. Javonte Williams had a decent game. Jacoby Ford had a really good game, and that was a good game for the Browns, who are also looking scary come playoff time. Travis Kelce had a solid fantasy game, but I think a lot of people are complaining about his. I'm sorry, I take that back. He has not had he had a decent game, but it's just they're losing. Kansas City is losing, and then the question is, are we seeing the beginning of the downfall of Kelce? Josh Jacobs was hurt and did not play. Didn't start him. Carlson had a solid game, and the Green Bay D didn't do much. Nothing too much on his bench. But Gary had enough, even with the Josh Jacobs donut to pull off a win. Mostly because of what we said with Brad Purdy had his worst game as a San Francisco 49er and possibly lost the MVP because of this. Because it wasn't just the fact that he lost, it was the way that they just absolutely made him look silly. He had four interceptions, some going back for touchdowns, and he eventually got benched. And what doesn't help him with his MVP case is Sam Darnold actually performed pretty decently, helping them nearly come back to within a score. Garrett Wilson didn't do much. Jordan Addison also was held in check in that Detroit game. Bijan had a solid game. Cook kind of came back down to earth. Likely had a decent tight end score. Devon A. Chain, I think, is another one. Did he get hurt? Let's just double check. No, he was healthy. Just hasn't been much since he came back. I mean, he did have a decent game, but it's just been not consistent. And then the San Francisco D, like we said, we're expecting a lot more. And then the only reason he has this score is because of Sanders from Miami kicking so many field goals. And that was another impressive win over Dallas because it looked like whoever had the last possession was going to score, and it just so happened that Miami did, and Sanders was able to kick that game winner. Off his bench, Nico Collins had an okay game. Dalton Schultz, solid as a tight end. Nothing from Zach Moss. Myers and Judy, nothing much there. So tough for Brad. As a San Francisco 49er fan, I, I see this time and time again, man. You you get on a roll and you do so well, and it looks like you're gonna steamroll everybody. But what that's it's kind of like Othello. You ever play Othello where you turn the board, and then you have like one color left, and then you flip it, and it completely flips the board. That's because you had this momentum, you have all this tape put on you, and in this case, all this tape on Brock Purdy. Ravens have the type of defense that can game plan that out, and then they knew what to do. It was kind of looked like it was going to be close in the beginning, especially when uh, Lamar Jackson got sacked in the end zone for a safety by the ref. But after that, it was all the Ravens, and then Purdy was not perfect today. Next up, we have Rich versus Mike. Mike had a super amazing, solid game, but that was mostly because of one player. Um, yeah, let's look at Richie's score. Lamar Jackson, like we said, he has a pretty, really good fantasy game, and it was MVP like in terms of him just making the San Francisco D look like they didn't know what they're doing. That's just Lamar Jackson. He's just out of this world. CD Lamb, another player with a really good game. Stephon Diggs didn't do too much in that game, even though they pulled off a win. David Montgomery, solid. James Conner, really good. Trey McBride, decent for a tight end. Deontay Johnson didn't do too much. Most of those go to another receiver. Tyler Bass did okay. And then the Buffalo D, kind of pretty pedestrian. And off his bench, Mixon was okay. Nothing much from Kincaid. Trevor Lawrence is steadily going down, and it's probably because of injuries. And then he has these other two defenses, Cleveland and Denver, who, pedestrian scores. But for Mike, if you look across the board for him, not much, right? Gardner Minshew didn't do too much. Russell Wilson on his bench actually did outperform him. Devontae Adams didn't do anything. He would have been better off starting Brandon Ayuk. Um, Singletary was kind of mediocre. Dallas Goedert did good. Nothing much from the kicker. And the Baltimore D, like we said, making San Francisco look mortal, had a really good score. Most of it was carried, though, by Justin Jefferson, who has this amazing, like in this background, I have the Lions and Vikings game kind of highlights playing. Justin Jefferson had that 3rd and 27 that he converted, and they were mounting a comeback, but then eventually the final pass to him got intercepted, but he was able to put up those fantasy points, especially late in the game. But mostly it was down to Amari Cooper, who had a big time 11 catch, 265 receiving yard, 2 touchdown, 1 2 point conversion game. He has the highest fantasy score of the week, I think, 46 here, and that largely makes up this difference, right? Sometimes you can expect Amari Cooper to give you a single digit game, and that would cause him to lose to Richie. But look at that, just balled out. So congrats to Mike on that win. Here's another one that went kind of back and forth. I think it kind of looked like Eric might win this one, but Darren pulls it out in the end. For Eric, he played Dak Prescott, the right play, because Dak Prescott had 22 points as opposed to Browning on his bench, who only had 19. Rashee Rice was probably the wrong receiver to play this week because even though he had 6 catches, it only went for 57 yards. T. Higgins, solid play. 5 catches, 140 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. Simple, easy play. Jamar Chase isn't playing. T. Higgins is the next man up as wide receiver 1 that day. Derrick Henry, this is an interesting one because Henry has been really, really low and inconsistent, but he finally has a vintage Derrick Henry game, giving Eric 22 points. Here he played the wrong Pittsburgh running back. Warren had only 8.7 points. He was projected for 10. But on his bench, Najee Harris outscored him, and that probably gets him the win if he plays him instead. Tight end, this is the other one. You live and die with Taysom Hill. When Taysom Hill balls out, he will get you wins. But when he doesn't do anything, he'll cost you big. And that's Taysom Hill. I think maybe Eric's roster was not built for that. He needs a little bit more of a floor from the other positions, and then Taysom Hill is just the bonus on top of that. But like we said, the roster just wasn't built for that. Jones had a solid game, helping them pull out this win against Carolina. McPherson didn't do too much, and then he chose a wrong defense, which netted him tough. He just played the wrong defense. And then off his bench, solid game from Zay Flowers. That was another good one. And okay game from Tyjae Spears, and nothing much from McLaurin. Darren was able to win because Mahomes just did enough at the end, even though they lost to Las Vegas. That was another interesting game. He looks mortal too, throwing picks. Rashid Shaheed had a really good game in a loss to the Rams. Chris Godwin, decent game. Christian McCaffrey, solid for him. Chuba Hubbard also been really good. He has been kind of the savior for Darren at the end, following Jonathan Taylor going out. Jason Ferguson did an okay job. And then Taylor I guess Taylor is back. So he's back and he helped him get this win. Nothing much from Butker, nothing much from the Seattle D. And then off his bench, really nothing much to mention here. But enough for Darren to win, and then he gets 5th place, and that guarantees Eric 6th place. So these two are done. Going forward, they're done. They don't have a game next week. I think they're the only ones. Mia Milo versus Barely a Pulse. Aaron had a pretty decent game. We'll start with him. You know what Aaron has been good at? Aaron has been good at finding good quarterbacks. I think the problem was playing the wrong ones on the wrong weeks. Him finding Jordan Love and playing him is decent. It just so happened that Justin Fields just outperformed him just a smidge, by a couple points. Mike Evans is back this week, scored big. Chris Olave, solid game. Decent game from Eckler, even though they have it, they kind of have that interim coach energy, when they fire the coach that they quit on and they have a new coach, then they're like, all right, let's get this. And then they actually played really well. Most of it was on the leg of Dicker, and we'll come back to him in one of the semifinal games, but they do much better. I mean, that's obviously not sustainable. We'll see what happens going forward for the Chargers. Pollard didn't do too much here. He's going to be one of those that you talk about as one of those players that we had high hopes for. We thought he was going to be our one of the top running backs because, he no longer has to share carries with Ezekiel Elliott. But I think the makeup of Pollard is he needs a backfield mate. George Kittle, amazing game in that loss against Baltimore. He was one of the few bright spots. He played Reed, who didn't give him nothing, and Tucker, big time game, helping them pull off that upset of San Francisco. Kansas City D didn't do too much. Off his bench, the only guy who scored outside of Fields was Beckham, but he wasn't really fantasy relevant. Now, I'd like to highlight the high score of the week. Yours truly, Mia Milo. This is just confirmation bias for me. Like I can hear it, right? You got to diversify. You can't have all Lions players. But if I made the playoffs, I would be in the finals right now with this score. 152.08, and this is what I envisioned. It didn't play out because I didn't do enough during the regular season to get that win. But Jared Goff didn't have the greatest of scores because most of the touchdowns that the Lions had went to the rushers. Amon-Ra St. Brown had his lone touchdown throw from Goff, but that gets him 22. Calvin really balled out. One He had a couple of touchdowns in that loss. He was one of the bright spots there. And then Brees Hall, like out of nowhere, he just went crazy, getting 20 rushing attempts for 95 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns and 95 receiving yards on 12 receptions. That ceiling of Brees Hall is elite, and that's why I picked him. That largely bolsters my score. Jahmyr Gibbs, another solid game. 15 rushing attempts, 80 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. He's looking like one of he. No bias here. I think he's the better running back in terms of him versus Bijan Robinson. Situation helps, but he is definitely a quicker and faster back, and he has that receiving skill. So I don't know. There was all this big talk about like positional value. Why are you taking a running back in the first round and all of that? They may reconsider it if they have the talent. There's a reason to get guys like that. Sam Laporta was kind of like the odd man out. He was there for the possession receptions, but that's okay because if the other Lions weapons are rolling, I'm fine. Same with Jameson Williams, who helps them get that win. Groupie, 2 extra points. Atlanta D, pretty good. And then off the bench, it doesn't end there because look at my bench. I didn't really mess with it because I knew Wilson Levis wasn't gonna play. Mitchell's not gonna play. He's out, but I'm not. We're out of the playoffs. So I'm not really making any moves. But look at what Tyler Algier is able to do. Look what Damian Pierce is able to do. I think he had a return touchdown, 174 return yards and a return touchdown. And George Pickens, 4 catches, 195 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. This after last week, I was like, I'm done. I'm done with George Pickens, and then he comes back and does a game like this. His ceiling is obviously there. I still am not sure I'm gonna pick him, but it's kind of like shows you, right? What is the quarterback situation for someone like George Pickens? Yeah. Amazing game by me. I would be in the finals, but that's neither here nor there. Let's go to the games that actually matter. James versus Jeremy. Ah, man, this one is a heartbreaker in terms for James because you're gonna have one of these games throughout the year, right? You're gonna have a stinker. To have it in a semifinals, that's just the wrong time to have it, and that's just what happened to James. His quarterback Tagovailoa didn't do too much. Cooper Kupp, kind of like, here, Puka Nakua, you take all the target shares. did an okay job, but it's not, the best receiver in the game type of score. AJ Brown too had a decent score, but not great. Rashad White happened to be his best player. Zach Charbonnet didn't do nothing. Tyler Conklin didn't do nothing. Debo Samuel, he's the one guy that you're hoping, oh, he can get me 40 points at any given day. He doesn't even break double digits. Jason Myers, okay, decent. Chicago D didn't do really nothing. And then off his bench, Gibson is his highest score, and nothing else from anybody else. It's just a tough break for James to make it this far, only for his team to let him down. You and then these guys are fighting for seeding, like Tunga Viola. It just so happened to be the type of game that didn't utilize Tunga Viola as much. It was you have guys like Cooper Cup and the Rams who are still fighting for playoffs. So you expect a little bit more from him. AJ Brown, they've been fighting to like turn it around, and they were able to at least turn around against the Giants, who gave them rubs, but AJ Brown wasn't the biggest part of that. So sometimes it just doesn't play out. And so congrats to James to making it this far, but he didn't make it. And on to Jeremy. And this is the usual score that we're expecting from someone like Jeremy, 141. That's kind of like Jeremy's baseline, but looks can be deceiving because it actually wasn't that great unless if you take out what Dicker did, who had I don't know how many field goals. He had one field goal from 20 to 29 yards, three field goals from 40 to 49 yards, and a 50 plus field goal and an extra point made, and then all the yards, the decimal point version of that. He had 24 points. So if he gets more of like a standard kicker score, like 6 points, it's not even that far. James obviously wasn't going to catch him, but that does create a cause for concern for Jeremy because we actually expect more points from some of his other guys. Like Josh Allen, solid. Tyreek Hill, decent for him, but we expect like the 20 to almost 30 points from him. DK Metcalf, decent game from him. Raheem Mostert, he's another one who's been giving him big time scores. They're still fighting for playoff season, so he can come back and play well. And then Evan Ingram, solid game. DeAndre Swift, solid game. Isaiah Pacheco, this is a little bit concerning because his helmet fell off and he got kicked in the head, so he might be a missing piece for Jeremy going forward. I don't know if Dicker can repeat this. Miami D, they have been better as of late, but this has been an okay score. Off his bench, nothing from Keenan Allen. Nothing really from Jamal Williams. Even DeAndre Hopkins, who, he's another one who fluctuates a lot. He either has these little low single digit games or all of a sudden he balls out. But again, they don't have Will Levis. Gabe Davis had a really solid game for him. But again, it's a difficulty with trying to pick the right receivers to play. I mean, look at these guys. Let's look at here because there's injuries, right? For Jeremy, we already said Raheem Mostert was questionable. Isaiah Pacheco is another guy who might not play because he's in concussion protocol. Keelan Allen is another missing piece for him. I like Jeremy's chances though because he still has a lot of guys that he can just plug in and be okay. Not some of those position players that you hope and pray. For Mike, his biggest loss is T.J. Hawkinson, and it looks like he's not going to play in the championship game. He's going to need a tight end. He does have a tight end on his bench, Cole Kmet, who balled out. I don't know what they're saying about him. He's doubtful to return. He got hurt. Mike's got to grab a tight end in waivers, and that might be the difference in the championship. But anyways, that's the recaps for the week. We are now going into week 17. These are the matchups, right? Like we said, 5th and 6th, I think, is done, and maybe the last place is done. So these are going to be the matchups. We have Mike versus Jeremy to find out who's going to win our championship. The third place game is going to be between Morgan and James. Week 17, there's me versus for Gary. I guess that's the seventh place game or ninth place game. And then Morgan versus James, and then Brad versus Aaron. Yeah. But anyways, it still is pretty interesting. Most of the interest for me now is on the teams winning, especially I still have a Lions player going into the I have the Lions team going in, so I'm still have rooting interest. And yeah, so we got one more week of this. So may the best man win between Mike B and Jeremy. All right, see you. Bye.